Relationships aren't always sunshine and rainbows. Just like in nature, you can't have rainbows without a little rain.
Journey with us
Shani Goodson
and Dr. Sundiata as we share stories and insights about our thriving, unconventional love life and our unique take on relationships and consensual non-monogamy.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back.
Hey.
Welcome back to SunShan and Rainbows. Glad you're here with us today.
So good to be back with you all once again.
Yeah, and exciting to be talking about more relationship stuff with you guys and talking to you a little bit more about our relationship and how we view relationships. So we got some good stuff for y'all today. We're going to talk about some things we've been talking about pretty much since we've known each other, I would say.
Yeah.
He brought this to me, this idea, like, I want to say like second conversation, third conversation that we ever had.
Yeah. Relationship philosophy. How was that? How was that like you get to know some new dude and he's talking to
He has
you
a
about
relationship
relationship
philosophy.
philosophy? How did that feel?
I really don't like being love bombed, and I feel like that's one of the best things about you is you are just not a love bomber. You are so like cautious and observant, and I love that. So when you introduce all the ways that you're cautious and observant, I'm here for it, and I'm trying to adopt it. So talk to us, Dr. Sunjata. Tell us.
Okay, so yeah, let's get started in terms of like, what it is. What do we mean by this relationship philosophy? And like starting out with like introducing it, I guess, and how and why I even created it. So basically I came up with this philosophy that was I call it my uh theory for sustainable theory of indivisible relationships.
That's what it used to be called, I feel like. And then you started trying to like work it a little bit.
Sustainable relationships
Yeah.
and things like that. That's still in process. And, I eventually probably will write some articles and a book about it.
I'm
But
gonna be the co-author.
yes, we're going to write a book about it because Shani's already been writing articles about it that you all get to see at Sustainable Solutions Media. Um, but the way it came up and really what it revolves around is this idea of there's five like relationship alignment buckets. And the reason why I came up with it is like for being non-monogamous, pretty much I would say like the first 2 years of my non-monogamy journey, I started to notice some patterns in terms of um, how relationships were going in ways that I didn't like, is really the best way to put it. And also in terms of like people being hurt, really. And like a unique thing about non-monogamy is that even when you're in a relationship, you can still be dating. So it's like almost like this constant, not for everyone, but especially for me, based on how my journey emerged and unfolded, this constant like dating process, constantly getting to know new people. And even though I was dating, I wanted to meet a specific person early on in my journey that could be a nesting partner, someone I can partner up and do life with. And I knew that that person would have to have certain characteristics, et cetera. And I had a whole list. And we'll talk about that on another show. But ultimately, like, I'm not someone that likes to throw people away. And just because we don't necessarily align romantically or sexually or whatever, when I invest time into getting to know someone, the idea of us just totally moving on and like almost throwing each other away because we're not aligned in that way just didn't feel right. And about, again, like 2 years into the relationship, I'm sorry, 2 years into my journey of being non-monogamous and dating a lot of people, I realized that I want to approach that differently. And I started having a conversation with people that I was dating or that I was interested in getting to know better, and letting them know kind of how I'm going to approach the relationship and seeing if that was okay with them. And basically saying it went a little something like this is that, when I get to know someone, I'm looking to cultivate loving connections. That's like the heart, the foundation. I'm looking to cultivate loving connections. And that could be familial, it could be platonic, it could be intellectual. or it could be romantic, or it could be sexual. And or it could be one of those or several of those things in terms of what's going to emerge organically in the way in terms of the ways that we're aligned. And with me looking to cultivate loving connections, I didn't want to go into it with like this predetermined idea of what the outcome is going to be. Just because we may have caught a spark in conversation, or we may have caught each other's eyes from an attraction standpoint. Um,
You
I,
learned that there's more to it than
I
that.
learned that there's more to it than that.
Definitely.
And I didn't like the idea of investing like a few months in the dating process and then folks realizing, like, you know what, we're not aligned in this way. So moving on. I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to start with the idea that let's just start with a blank slate. Let's get to know each other and let's see where we organically end up. And in my mind, when I was first, saying this, I'm like, it really takes a year. It probably will take a year or up, 6 to 12 months to really land on where we're going to organically align naturally. We can experiment in all these different buckets, but ultimately, when we experiment and get to know each other and spend time, we'll learn what organically emerges is like the ways that we're aligned. So,
So basically, it's
yeah.
like different facets of relationships, like different parts of relationships, different like aspects of relationships, different ways of interacting, different ways of like relating with each other. And like Sunjata said, you can have one or two, or you can have all of them. Um, and so we're going to talk about what these buckets are. What are these different like dimensions of
Yeah.
relationships that you can experience with other people? So we're going to kind of break down each of the five buckets that we have kind of over time tried to refine,
Hmm.
still refining and defining, but we'll let you know where we are now, what our best thinking is right now.
Yeah, and the cool thing is like once Shani and I started to get to know each other and the alignments start showing up immediately and like all the buckets, and we talk about it in the terms of like low alignment, like medium alignment and high alignment. And for us, it really starts showing up really quickly in terms of like high alignment, but especially on the intellectual side, because Shani immediately started to help me expand on these ideas. That's how much we were aligned. And we took it out of my head and like she like wrote down a bunch of notes and just defined it more clearly. And as I said, Shani has written several articles about it. But we're going to share with you all today each of the buckets and some of the characteristics of it. And I'll start by talking about familial. And a familial connection usually refers to the relationship between people who are related by blood, marriage, adoption, siblings, whatever. And it's really a bond that connects family members regardless of distance and time. And oftentimes we hear the idea that someone feels like family even though it's not you're not related by blood.
Yeah, your chosen family.
Yeah, the whole idea of chosen family. And I think about the familial connection in terms of just this natural like kinship feeling, especially when there's a lot of alignment around like familial values and the ways that you think about how a family dynamic should work. Things like how do we raise our kids? Do we think about those things in a similar way? In terms of the ways that we support people that are close to us in our lives. How does that look? Is there a similar shared history around experiences growing up?
Yeah.
All these different things can inform that familial alignment.
Yeah. Um, and like sometimes you've known somebody a really long time and it feels like their family. And that has a lot to do with like all the experiences you've shared together and how often you showed up for each other and things like that can really deepen that kind of like familial feeling.
Mhm.
And that feeling can feel good, even when you're kind of lacking other things. Like I feel like that bond is one that helps keep y'all keep the longevity of the relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Interestingly, like we often talk about, well, we'll get there later. The next bucket I'm going to talk about is the intellectual bucket, which Sunjata already kind of alluded to. And this is one where people have like shared interests and their thoughts and their ideas and their values are kind of the same. We often say, the way they do math maybe is like very similar, the way they do math on certain things, the way they think through things. And this is a connection that's probably going to take you to like your deeper conversations, where you get to kind of like dive into each other's thoughts and perspectives. And usually people are very curious about each other. There's like a curiosity in each other, about getting to know each other's interests and the way your mind works. And like you have conversations with somebody when you have high intellectual alignment where it feels very like intellectually stimulating. Um,
Yeah.
and you feel like they are contributing to your thoughts in
Hmm.
some way.
Yeah.
Respectful disagreement. And this can also deepen your emotional connection, especially for people who find this type of connection to be really important. Like I consider myself someone who like values intellectual connection very highly. And I find that deep intellectual connections often lead to like deep emotional connections for
Yeah.
me.
I want to say something about intellectual that I think is a telltale sign as well. It's like a high intellectual connection or alignment is when um, you're not crossing signals. Your signals aren't getting crossed often, which tends to happen when there's a low to no intellectual alignment with someone. Like you just get each other. You naturally get each other. You find yourself nodding when each other is speaking. You find yourself saying, you know what, man, I had that same thought, or I was thinking the same thing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And we have different like roles that we talk about, but we're not going to get into all that today. But these connections can lead to a lot of bonding. Intellectual connection definitely leads to lots of bonding, and that leads into the next one.
Yeah. So the next one is platonic.
You know, you've heard of that one before.
Yeah. So, when it's the homie, when it's someone that just feels like the homie, it's just easy to be around them. You feel like you can share things with them and they are a trusted friend. You feel like there's a level of trust and support and
And
security and
safety.
safety within that dynamic, within that relationship and that
Hmm.
connection. You have similar interests. Y'all may enjoy going out and doing the same things. You may enjoy staying home and doing the same things. You have a similar rhythm around those things, a similar sense of humor. All these things inform a dope platonic connection and high platonic alignment. The emotional support, there's honesty, the communication styles line up. There's obviously a lot of crossover with familial and intellectual
Yeah.
within that platonic
I
connection.
think there's a lot of crossover between a lot of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And crossover, intersection, interrelated in a lot of ways, and one informs the other in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. But yeah, and there's little tweaks, in terms of the differences. But I think one of the things that really informs the platonic is the fun, like your capacity to have fun with one another,
Yeah.
right? Like you enjoy doing some of those like social fun things in a similar way where just being in each other's presence is going to feel like a party. It's going to feel like a good time when there's like a high alignment within that platonic bucket.
Yeah. I love this bucket. I think it's central. You know, a lot of times people think, you know, you can't have a platonic connection and like another connection at the same time. But I feel like platonic connections are central to a lot of
Yeah.
our very high contact relationships. Like you said, I feel like the homie. You feel seen, you feel understood, you feel like emotionally supported. I love that one.
Yeah.
Attraction. So this is actually a new kind of bucket that and by new I mean like recent. I
Like
would
with
say it's the most recent addition.
Yeah, because it replaced romance. Like earlier when I was breaking down how it all started, I used to say romance.
Was a bucket.
But we then, through our conversations and thinking through these things, we removed romance from one of the five buckets.
Yeah,
And,
and
and
we'll
we'll,
talk more about how like romance plays into all of this and how, yeah, in a second. But attraction, you know what this is.
yeah,
This is when you just feel drawn to somebody, you feel interested in them, and it could be physical. It could be like the way they smell. It could be their personality. It doesn't necessarily have to be all physical attraction, but that is the bulk. We feel like there is a good amount of like physicality that's involved in the physical attraction. This is about desirability. Like how with that sense of chemistry, you've
mhm,
heard people use that word before, or spark. That's what we mean when we're talking about physical when we talk about attraction.
yeah. And it can be energetic. Some people just vibe off of people's energy. It's like, yo, their energy is attractive to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be like the visual, physical that what we see. It could be their energy.
And one of the things that we have learned, and I think one of the reasons that Sundiata even started thinking about these buckets is because the attraction bucket can sometimes feel so overwhelming that it can fuel that new relationship energy, which can sometimes let you not, it doesn't allow you to assess your relationship alignment as well as you would because you're just so kind of blinded
Mhm.
by a strong spark or a strong attraction. So I'm sure you can relate to this.
Yeah, and I think it's important because a lot of times attraction gets conflated with romance. And sometimes you can be attracted to some elements of a person, their personality, their style, etc., but you're not romantically, into someone just because you may be attracted to certain elements. So I think that's why it was important why we removed romance from one of the five buckets and we brought it back in as a way that the other buckets can inform romance. And we'll talk more about that. But I think that's a key distinction. And again, one of the reasons why I was motivated, I don't think I said this earlier, but one of the reasons I was motivated to create these buckets and create this language and bring this awareness in these ways is to reduce harm. At the end of the day, I like to show up in the world in ways that reduce harm. I like to create solutions to problems I see in the world in ways that reduce harm. And I think oftentimes people can move through their search for, romance in ways that cause harm. And the ways that they just kind of go through the process and discard people, it causes harm in a
And
lot of ways.
and also like not clearly communicate. Like
Mhm.
sometimes, and I think, sometimes people don't clearly communicate, not on purpose, but because they don't have the language.
Right.
They don't know how to communicate. And I think that's part of when
Yes.
you say like harm reduction, I
Hmm.
think you're saying also like giving people language
Yes.
so that it's easier to understand. Because common language is really important, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that we actually know what the other person is trying to communicate. So some of the things we say are included in attraction, maybe like the way their face looks, their body type, their style, the way their voice sounds. I like that one. Some people are like very audiophilic, the way they smell. I already said that one. The way somebody feels or responds to their touch. That's like a good chemistry feeling, when somebody responds to your touch in a special way or a specific way. Their posture and their body language and just like their mannerisms and their quirks. The thing about attraction is it's very subjective. So sometimes something that's charming to you is an annoying idiosyncrasy to somebody else. And yeah, so there's a lot to attraction. We can go, I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode just of talking about like the desirability
Yeah.
part of this.
Yeah, and maybe we should
Right?
let us know if y'all want us to,
Right?
because
We can split this
we
up.
have a lot of notes on attraction in itself and how just the nuances of it all. And again, I love how it gives us language, and we're hoping that it'll give other people language and ways to articulate, how they're getting to know people, and that just through that process. So again, it reduces harm. Not only does it reduce harm, but it also can help us more efficiently and effectively find true alignment.
And
Um,
reflect on ourselves and how we're
Learn more about
approaching
ourselves.
relationships.
Yeah. And what
Definitely.
we really want and being able to communicate that. So the fifth bucket is sexual. And, sexual. Now, basically, a sexual connection with another person is a type of intimate relationship that involves physical and sexual attraction, as well as sexual activity and expression, right? So, this is something that can exist independently outside of the other buckets, or it can coexist with them. It can be interrelated, or it can be, separate. There, especially for those of us who navigate non-monogamy, we have this freedom to cultivate connections in different ways. And sometimes, you meet somebody and it could just be a bomb ass sexual connection, even if there's not high alignment in other buckets, but the sexual connection is explosive. And within the context of non monogamy, we have the benefit of being able to cultivate that and create space within the other ways that we don't connect, and just focus and connect on that sexual attraction. So, with honoring the fact that everyone isn't sexual, this doesn't apply. Everyone doesn't experience sexual connection. There's asexual people, et cetera. But for those who do, this can be a very important bucket in terms of teasing out, alignment and misalignment.
And this is
Um,
part of the reason why we separated the attraction bucket and the sexual bucket because of the fact that not everybody feels sexual desire. Some people are asexual or gray sexual or various different, types of sexuality along the asexual to sexual spectrum.
yeah,
But also, you can be highly attracted to somebody, but then like the sexual connection is not great.
yeah,
And sometimes the intellectual connection makes the sexual connection, stronger, but your attraction bucket is not as high. I'm sure that has happened to some of you who are listening, where you feel very attracted to somebody, but not sexually attracted to them, or opposite, where you feel very sexually attracted to somebody, but you're like, I'm interested in you. I'm so surprised at myself.
yeah.
So that's part of the reason why we separated those two to make it even more clear.
Yeah. And some of the characteristics of a sexual connection are the physical attraction, just the sexual attraction in terms of the ways that you all like to engage in different sexual activities, if that's in alignment or not. There's also the ways that you express yourselves sexually, in terms of the ways you touch or talk, just the way you move through the sexual experience and the ways you show up in a sexual context, which can determine a lot and inform a lot. Also, just the emotional connection. For a lot of people, sex is also tied to their emotions. For some, it isn't, but for a lot of people, it is. And, having some alignment in those ways is also important, as well as the way that you communicate and consent to engaging in various sexual dynamics is an important characteristic of a sexual connection. Um, it's we can get into like drives and approaches, but ultimately it's like that chemistry thing, right? When we talk about like chemistry, sexual chemistry, um you know I think we all know, for those of us who are sexual beings and who are into sex and or highly sexual or somewhere on that side of the scale or the spectrum, it's nothing like feeling that sexual attraction when it's good and it aligns, and it really, really can inform, a relationship and what that relationship can be. So, you want to say anything
So
else about that?
no, I think you covered the sexual bucket like really well. But I kind of want to talk about how we bring all of this together, unless you got something else to add.
No, I would love to talk about how it informs romance.
Great. So all those buckets we just talked about: familial, intellectual, platonic, attraction, and sexual. The way we kind of look at it is a high level of alignment. If you mutually feel a high level of alignment on those five buckets, then it's very likely that y'all have a really good romantic connection. And part of the reason this came up is because I have always questioned, what is romance? Like, what is it? Can somebody please explain what love actually is? What does it mean to you? What does that romantic feeling mean? And that's kind of the reason why I didn't like it being its own bucket by itself, because I feel like a lot of these things contribute to that, including the familial bucket, which was one we kind of struggled with a little bit. But if you feel like you're somebody, if you feel like you're doing life with someone, that is a familial connection, right? You feel that sense of like responsibility toward them, like you feel that sense of like commitment toward them. That does kind of strengthen romantic relationships, but they can exist without that. And I would actually say that romantic relationships can be defined by you. And that's another spectrum, because some people are aromantic, right? And some people are like highly romantic. But you might not need all of these buckets to feel a strong romantic connection, or you might not need to feel high alignment in all of these. I can speak for myself that I don't typically feel romance unless I feel a high level of alignment in all five of these buckets. That's just me. Now, some other people might say, I don't really need to feel that familial connection I think that kind of aligns with like solo poly people too. They don't really need to feel that familial connection necessarily
Mhm.
to feel romance. So we left a lot of wiggle room in here. I think you can kind of make romance add up to be what you want it to be. That's kind of reason why I like this approach here.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say for me, we talked about specifically, I believe, what is it? Attraction. Attraction. If attraction is high or medium to high, intellectual is medium to high, and sexual is medium to high. those things tend to add up to show up to say romance.
I think that's for you because I think other people would say not intellectual, but platonic
Mhm,
attraction and sexual might be
mhm.
more important for them. But I know for you, intellectual is high. And I think intellectual contributes a lot to platonic for you,
Yeah.
but maybe not for like everyone. What do you think about that?
Yes, for me, definitely intellectual, platonic. They're kind of one and the same in terms of like where romance meets, what I need to feel like a strong romantic connection to someone.
It's true.
And then the attraction piece, I would say that's something that I learned early on is how important. I didn't realize how important attraction was, um, in terms of like for me to have a sustainable relationship, that included romance and sex. Attraction,
You used to downplay it a little bit.
I downplayed it a little bit, and also I realized how much I needed to like really own what it was that I was attracted to be able to like really be clear about that, so that I wasn't in a position where I was leading anyone on,
Mhm.
or just dating people and just wasting their time because ultimately the attraction wasn't going to be high enough for that relationship to sustain a sexual or romantic element.
So I think that so I'm gonna give y'all a little context about Sundiata. I feel like the intellectual connection really draws him in. So in his early in his dating life, and you can correct me when if I'm not speaking for you, but I feel like early in your dating life, you would be like, oh my gosh, this intellectual connection is so great. Like, I'm not that shallow. I'm putting that in air quotes for those of you who are listening. I'm not that shallow. That attraction is so important to me. But I just want to make sure that I'm saying I don't think it's shallow.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
think preferences are shallow.
Yeah,
So I think what you're trying to say is that for you, physical attraction is important,
yeah,
but the intellectual connection is also like so important that it was almost kind of
yeah.
making you feel like you could.
Yeah. And I realized that I couldn't maintain a sexual relationship with someone if the physical attraction wasn't really high. Where initially I thought I could, because if the intellectual was dope, I thought that that would inform enough of the connection, that would be enough to keep me engaged in that connection, even from a sexual standpoint. And I realized early on it wasn't, because I see so many people that have such a wide range of, physical attraction, capacity, and mine was. I learned that it was narrower than a lot of people, that I know. I'll say it that way,
And it's like,
and I
so
had to accept that, and without feeling shallow about, feeling
exactly.
shallow for that.
And that kind of goes into like how, we use this for reflection.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like we use this tool for reflection a lot. For myself, also, I find that sometimes I would be, experiencing a relationship and I'm like, something doesn't feel right. Like, what is it about this relationship? Something's not feeling like it's just not clicking for me the way I want it to click. And I couldn't really figure out why until I would start to sit down and think about the buckets. Okay, well, how do I feel about them intellectually? Uh, we had this conversation and that conversation, so it's kind of medium. How do I feel about them platonically? Oh, we had this. So that's the way that I would start to think about things. And then I would say to myself, okay, it's the intellectual connection that's not quite right in this relationship. And it helps me look for what I'm looking for more clearly. It helps you with your discernment, at least helps me with my discernment. And that's one of the ways that I like to use this
Yeah, and we've done this exercise so many times
with each
where
other also.
we will name a person that we've dated, or been connected to or partnered to in our non-monogamy journeys, and we'll say, okay, let's go through the buckets. How is your familial connection with so and so? How's your intellectual connection with so and so, and so forth and so
We'll
on.
ask for examples. Like we'll ask each other for examples because that kind of stuff really, not only does it matter, help you with your discernment, but it also helps us flesh out this idea more
Yeah.
too.
And we would like talk about like, okay, I have three highs with this person and two mediums, or like three lows and one high, or like literally line that up with a given person. And it's a interesting exercise because I think it informs outcomes. It has helped us to gain some clarity around why a relationship transitioned the way the way that it did, and the reasons. And it also helps us to be more discerning moving forward. Because again, I'll speak for myself. Like, I want highly aligned relationships. I like to call it
Mhm.
soul aligned relationships.
Mm.
Um, no matter the context, like I have platonic relationships with people that I met in this non-monogamy space that never went to romance, never went to sexual, but I value that relationship just as much.
Because the deep alignment in
Yes,
intellectual bucket, in the platonic bucket, you
and
can have a
familial.
deep relationship with someone and not hit all the buckets because romance is not the pinnacle. Like romance is not the tippy top of relationships. It's not the end all be all, you know?
Yeah, and I value and I communicate with, I date those people like that I have those platonic familial connections or the non-sexual romantic connections. I make time for those people as well. We go to dinner, we hang out, we talk on the phone, we confide in each other in similar ways that I may with someone who I do have a romantic or sexual connection with. And again, that's the beauty of being non-monogamous. I remember being monogamous and not being able to maintain those type of connections with women especially if at one point there was a sexual romantic connection. Whereas in my non-monogamy journey, there have been relationships where we experimented with or we started out in a romantic connection, a romantic and sexual context, and ultimately transitioned to a more platonic familial. But the relationship is still thriving. There's still as much love and value within
And time
and
spent.
time spent with
You
that
know,
person.
because that's another thing, and we have to this tendency to think we should only be spending time with people who we're romantically involved with. There's also this idea that I noticed that's pervasive that if you have a platonic connection with somebody, that must exclude sex, and I like that this allows us to have both. This allows you to have a platonic relationship and a sexual relationship, and I do have relationships like that. Like I have relationships where I feel safe and we have fun together and our sense of humor is the same and we like the same jokes, but we're not that intellectually aligned, maybe like we don't communicate the same way.
Mhm.
Maybe we can't talk about the really hard life, doing life things together because we don't do math similarly enough. However, the platonic connection is there because the fun is there and the emotional safety is there. And the, sharing secrets is there. And then we also kind of have a sexual relationship too because we're attracted to each other. And it doesn't go to romance. Like it doesn't go to this place where we feel the lovey-dovey is necessarily. So I still kind of don't know what romance is unless I feel it. Um, that's kind of still where I stand on that. I
Yeah.
still don't have words for romance.
So I think this is a good
Cool.
time to make our transition to our segment for this show
What's the segment called?
because you just mentioned the word lovey-dovey. And so we're going to introduce you all for the first time to a segment that we have called the Gushy Lovey-Dovey Rainbows. I said gushy, the Gushy Lovey-Dovey Rainbows, where basically we share with you some of the ways that the lovey-dovey gushy moments in our relationship show up because we're constantly sharing them with each other.
Let's see where to start.
Well, and this, since we're talking about the buckets,
Yeah, I'm trying to decide which bucket to start in. Where
this is
should we
this is a
go?
good time to do it using the buckets. It doesn't always happen this way, but since this is the episode that we're talking about buckets, we thought it'd be a good idea to share some of our lovey gushy moments through how we do it when we're talking about the buckets.
Interesting though, I think this is a good tool too, because it's kind of nice to compliment somebody through the buckets, right? Like I'm always trying to think of new nice things to say to you. So like this is good. Now I can have like more nice things in my repertoire. Let me see, where can I start? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and start with no, I'm not gonna start there. I'm gonna start with intellectual. No, I'm gonna start with platonic. You make me feel so seen. He makes me feel really seen. He really like gets me. I feel like other people don't. I always feel like an alien, but this is like intellectual and platonic for me. I felt like an alien a lot, and he just makes me feel so understood,
Yeah.
like so normal.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay there. I'm gonna stay in the intellectual. Hold on, was that you were that was platonic for you?
Yes, intellectual platonic
Well,
slash
I'm
platonic.
gonna start in the intellectual and kind of stay on that same vibe because one of the things that I share with Shani often that I noticed in our dynamic is that I don't have to like censor myself because I'm afraid that I'm gonna say something that's gonna trigger her. Whereas in past relationships, or relationships that I have with some people in general, whether they be family members or somewhere across the context of these five buckets, where it's like certain topics are landmines, or certain ways that I'm me, just literally just showing up as me are landmines, meaning they'll trigger something, it'll start an argument, signals will get crossed. That doesn't happen with Shani, and that is such a relief, and it's such a um it makes me feel so secure being in relationship with her because I can show up as my full authentic self in all the complex nuanced ways, and she's going to get me. She's not going to misunderstand. She's not going to take things personal that I didn't intend to be personal. And I just can't explain how secure that makes me feel. And that's something I love about her so much.
I really feel like that's such a deep intellectual alignment between us. Like, I know that you're going to tell me the truth. Like, I know that you are not going to say anything that you don't really mean. And I know you're going to say what's on your mind.
Mhm.
That brings such a level of trust. And I think that has to do with your communication style, and I feel like that has to do with alignment in the way that we communicate. And there's so much, and I'm back in the intellectual bucket because there's a lot there.
Mhm.
But I feel like you're so like rational, and to me, like you're so rational, which is an intellectual alignment. Because sometimes people feel like they're being rational, but it's not rational to me.
Right.
Like he has this way of asking questions instead of getting defensive, and like to me, that's such a turn on.
Mm.
And all of these like intellectual alignments really strengthen the sexual bucket to
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
because and the platonic part, because I feel like our sexual connection is so loving and explosive and intimate, and just and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I feel so safe, like I feel so secure knowing that those other buckets are like solid and aligned. So
Yeah, yeah. That makes me want to go to platonic. I'm gonna hold off on the sexual for now.
trying to save that one for that.
But like with platonic, you know, I love that we like doing the same things. We have a similar like energy around like when it's time to like go out and be like YOLO and having fun and doing some things socially, whether it be hanging out late or whether it be, what, it's a little early, but we ready for bed. Let's go to bed. Like we have a similar energy around like neither one of us is like the life like party animal that got to drag the other person out. We have kind of a similar like we like to go out and we like to socialize and have fun, but we also love to spend time at home on the couch, and that's fun for us.
And we leave at the same time. You'd be like, "You ready?" Yup.
Right. And when we're out, when it's like, hey, you ready to go? We like, yeah. It's never like, oh man, I ain't ready to leave. You ready to leave? You party pooper. No, like we have a similar energy. Or if it's like, yo, we having a good time, like we vibe and let's stay, let's kick it. We vibe. We're always in a similar space around those things.
It's true. And like we'll watch fall down YouTube rabbit holes. See, this is intellectual slash platonic, because we're like shared interests. We both like to be outside,
In nature.
in nature,
Yeah.
and both like will get stuck watching ridiculous things in nature, which is really fun. I feel like that always happens.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's
We kind of
fun.
have a similar sense of awe around the same similar things in the world. Like we both will get caught up on like, animals in nature
Yeah.
and insects and birds and we'll have a similar sense of like,
A similar
wow,
sense of
did
awe.
you see that bird and the way it just did XYZ? Like we can be like nerdy about the same things and not feel like the other person's going to judge us. You know what I mean? Like
Or
there
that we're
was
boring the other
or-
person.
that part.
Ugh.
Like I literally had relationships, partnerships with women where we got along. It was dope. We had several alignments, but certain things it's like I can't talk. I can't nerd out on that. Or I can't go down a certain rabbit hole. And I'm like, that's boring. Like we're not talking about that. I don't want to talk about that. Like I knew not to talk about certain things. And the range,
Yeah.
when I tell you the range with those past relationships, it was like, okay, I could stick in the pocket that they want to stay in because I have range. But with Shani, it's like
There's a lot of range.
there's a lot of range, and we can go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other one.
It's true.
And all the different ways.
It's so true. Even
Yeah.
like risk tolerance feels like
Yeah.
similar.
Hmm.
Like the types of activities we're willing to engage in versus not willing
Yeah.
to engage in
Yeah.
feel really similar. So yeah, those alignments always feel really good. And the familial too, we have like similar values as far as like how we want to raise our kids and like
Hmm.
as far as like what we consider to be commitment, and what
Yeah.
we consider to be, partnership. I feel like that
Yeah.
falls into the familial type bucket.
Yeah.
And I
Also, I think
yeah.
it's a lot to be said about the children thing because
Hmm.
one of the first things that I mentioned to Shani when we first started talking on the phone was that I'm a conscious parent. I've transitioned away from more conventional ways of parenting, meaning, I'm more about having a relationship based dynamic with my children, where we communicate, we talk, I listen to them, I get their feedback, their input. I'm not just looking to always impose my will. In fact, 95% of the time, I'm not imposing my will in terms of my leadership and guidance. I bring that when it's needed, but it's always done in a way where it's in relationship and using discernment around allowing them to make sure that they're feeling like they have agency and they're able to, I value and honor their intellectual capacities, their desires, their wants, their needs. I'm not just a parent that's just my way or the highway.
So
That
you
I'm
already know. I was like, because I also have 3 kids, and that would be a problem when I was dating in the past in my relationships before Sundiata. It would be like, why don't you just, beat him? He's crying. You need to pop him. That would be the type of energy, and it's just such a turn off.
Yeah,
So
I
for
don't hit my
him,
kids. I don't beat my
yeah,
kids.
like that's just foreign concept to me. So he was talking about conscious parenting. I was like, ooh, alignments. And it wasn't even the first time we were on the phone. Okay, it was the first time we ever met when you didn't like me yet.
Yeah, we talked about that on previous episodes.
Go back.
Yeah. So,
Ooh,
I definitely want to talk about
attraction.
attraction because, again, I had a list of some of the things that I was looking for in terms of like a woman and attraction. And, Shani showed up, in a way in terms of just, her aesthetic, that I'm highly attracted to. I'm highly attracted to, her build. I'm highly attracted to her smile. I'm highly attracted to, her hair and her cheekbones and her eyes. And it's just so many things that I'm attracted to that just informs the romance and informs, the sexual energy that I bring, to our connection, which is very, high in terms of our sexual alignment. And it's because I like what I see when
I'm
she
just looking
moving
at him with the hard eyes right now, y'all.
when she moving through the room. I mean, like many times throughout many days, like I'm just watching her walk by and just taking it in, like, mm, I'm loving what I'm seeing. And then also I'm touching her. Like throughout the day, I'm touching her, I'm feeling on her, I'm kissing on her, just hugging on her like several times throughout the day because I'm so attracted to her. I can't keep my hands off of her.
It's the same. I remember the first time I saw Sindretta, I was like, oh, beard, ooh, hair. And then you guys can't really see it, but he has these freckles on his nose, and they're so cute. We used to FaceTime, and I would be like, oh, the freckles. And he's just so fine. Just the way also he walks and the way he moves through the room. He has like an air about him, like this quiet control that's just so attractive. Be like, yes, like help people, be kind. Oh, he's so thoughtful. Like just the way he carries himself gives that aura. But
Yeah.
again, the hair, the skin, his skin is like so. He talks about his skin because he got some issues sometimes, but like, look at the skin and the beard. Oh, yeah, and his chest. I also rub on I also rub on him at random times. It's true. I can't keep my hands off you either. I'm like, okay, we need like a 17-second hug. Let's go. Like, kiss me on my forehead, please. Like,
And for those of you who are listening, we have a video that, that's why we keep saying we're for those of you who are listening, you're noticing that we're referring to things that those who are watching the video can see. So if you're only listening, make sure you go check out the video as
yeah,
well.
especially
And-
for this one.
yeah, and for the sexual attraction, I think something that's, or a sexual bucket that's really important is just that, I've been in relationships where me and the other person had different sex drives.
Mm,
And I'm so grateful that Sheenie and I have a similar, if not the same, sex drive. Like that's such a nuanced thing that when I was going into relationships, especially when I was in the process of getting married, that I didn't really have the language or even the insight to even know that's something that could be misaligned.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that that could be a thing. And I was, and just in full transparency, it was. You know, me and my wife were misaligned in that way, and it's not a good or a bad thing. You know, in terms of like low to high sex drive, it's just a
It
is
just is.
thing, and I respect anyone across that spectrum. But I can say that it is amazing when you are when for myself, it has been amazing for me to be in a high contact relationship with someone who has the same or similar sex drive, you know, to me.
And in the same like vein, just like even initiating sex is like so
Oh my
it can be
gosh,
hard,
such a
you
nuanced
know,
thing.
it can be hard, but like I feel like we're very balanced in like who initiates and how it's initiated and
Mhm.
like it just flows. Like there's
It's
never
easy.
it's just easy. Like
Yeah,
there's never any question. It's never like, oh, are you gonna want to? It's
yeah.
like, yeah, it
I
just
used to be
we just
afraid of
go.
getting rejected in some relationships that I've had, you know, in my monogamous days and in my non-monogamous days. There were relationships where, you know, I would say to myself, I'll just let her initiate because I don't want to get rejected. I'm afraid of getting rejected. So I'll wait till she initiates.
I would and you know, like in some relationships, you can say, who's the initiator? Like who's more of the initiator? I genuinely can't answer that question when it comes to with the two of us. Like I
Yeah.
honestly could not, I couldn't. Like it's
Yeah.
very balanced. So
Yeah.
like that kind of nuance
That's dope.
thing, yeah, is really
That's
fun.
dope. And that's when, again, you know that the sexual bucket has a very high alignment when those things start lining up. And we're really fortunate. And we always, you know, in this segment, you know, we're doing a lovey dovey, gushy rainbow thing, but we do this in our day to day lives with each other. And we decided that we would make this a segment just to, you know, model it and show, you know, people and give some folks insight into like how our relationship operates in this way. And the way that we're doing this for you all, again, we do it, you know, for each other. So
And it never gets old.
yeah.
Don't think it's ever like I'm not a huge words of affirmation person. He is,
Mhm.
but words of affirmation for some people is really high, and even for somebody who's not that high for it, it never gets old. Like it doesn't get old. You can always say it, and I'm always gonna be like, oh, really?
Yeah, it always feels good to hear them.
It
It's
does.
yeah. So whew, this was fun.
This was fun, and this might be my favorite one so far.
And this was our longest episode. It would be.
Of
It's a
course.
lot of content, a lot of nuanced, you know, complex things that we kind of went into. And but that was a lot of fun. And you know, shout out to those who hung with us
I know. I
throughout the
hope you
whole
guys thought it was
episode.
fun too.
Yeah, leave us some feedback. Let us know what you thought about this episode. If you heard something that you want to hear more about, let us
If
know.
you want us to talk about, so basically the buckets, the familial, intellectual, and platonic buckets are compatibility. Like those are more focused on compatibility, and like attraction and sexual are focused more on desirability. So if you want us to like talk more about them in more detail, we can do that and do it in 2 episodes like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're gonna bring this up a bunch more times anyway, and probably use this as like a reference episode. Go listen to that episode if you wanna know what we're talking about here. So thanks for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see you all and talk to you all on the next episode. Until next time,
Bye.
peace. Love y'all. Thank you
You
for
for
listening
listening
to
to
Sunshine
Sunshine
and
and Rainbows.
Rainbows. If you enjoyed the show, please show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing this episode.
Please also subscribe to our media platform, Sustainable Solutions Media, and follow us on Instagram at Sustainable Solutions Media.